Hi, I'm Effie, and a little while back I put a call out on my Instagram asking people to give me their, as specific as they wanted, requests for book recommendations. So today I'm going to be running through some of the requests I received and giving some recommendations to the best of my ability. I absolutely love and thrive on giving book recommendations, but some of these really were quite challenging. But I think it's more fun that way, if I'm being completely honest. So the first one was for a book that made me angry, but in a good way. And the book that immediately comes to mind is The Ravening by Daniel Church. In this book we are following Jade, I think is the name of our main character, whose mother went missing on a creepy dark road in the middle of the night when she was just a teenager, and that's had a lasting impact on her life. But she's now 30 and her life is starting to turn around. She's got a girlfriend that she feels like she can rely on and she's feeling good, but then her incredibly toxic ex comes back into her life and everything is just completely shaken up for her. This is a brilliant book with like folk horror elements, and also it will just make you so angry, the things that she goes through. But she's just got such a strong spirit as well, and I was gripped from start to finish reading this book. The next request really was quite a challenge for me, and it is a horror book with a time loop or cycle that hints this has happened before and will happen again. Unfortunately, I couldn't think of any horror recs. I'm not a massive horror reader. Like, I don't not read horror, but it's just not generally a genre I have a lot of experience in to be able to give good recommendations. However, I did come up with some books from other genres that might satisfy that itch. So we've got the fantasy book The Last Hour Between Worlds by Melissa Caruso. I haven't finished this one yet, but it has this weird kind of like time is layering over itself, and it's just such an imaginative concept. And actually I think there is a time loop aspect to it, because I think there's an element of like everyone dies and then kind of things reset and she's trying to tell everyone you're all gonna die. So I guess maybe it works, except it's the wrong genre. And then a book that I didn't like, but I mean very much fits the time loop, is The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. This book really didn't work for me, but I think that's because I had a hard time differentiating between the different characters. But you know, if you're looking for a mystery thriller, maybe this book will work for you. And then the final recommendation is a YA mystery thriller, and it's That's Not My Name by Megan Lally. Like, it's not technically a time loop, but there is a sense of something having happened before and likely will happen again. For the next one, I'm gonna have to refer to my laptop because it's a book with a declaration of love that will have you swooning, and I've picked out two specific declarations and the books they belong to. So the first one is from By the Pint by Gemma Croft. Reconsider, please. Immortality isn't everything it's cracked up to be. Stay human. Stay with me. I want you. Casey the Temper Freckleman. Moonflower, stay with me and I'll give you everything you desire. You want hotels? Done. CEO of Blackheart Enterprises? It's yours. You want a gothic castle in the middle of nowhere? A super modern inner city penthouse apartment? Just name it, baby. You want me to kill your enemies? I'll do it. I would worship you for an eternity if you'd let me. I'd do anything for you to keep you. And then our second quote comes from Kingdom of Lies by Ben Alderson. I see you, darling. Not how you see yourself in the reflection of those who don't know you. You are gentle. You are concerned. In all my years, I've never come across a person able to shift my mind and beliefs. But here I lie in the arms of a fae, your arms. Robin, you're no monster. I've seen monsters, I've faced them, but when I look at you, I see the vulnerability of humanity. And this was actually a hard one for the opposite reason to the last request, in that I love a declaration of love that has me swooning. So I highlight them in almost every book. So I was able to find so many and then trying to narrow it down. Our next request was top 3 books with unhinged feminine rage or unapologetically evil femme energy. And I ended up coming up with 5. In fairness, one of them's a short story, but you asked for 3, I give you 5, which is very on brand. If I can recommend a book, I will just recommend any and all. So we've got Venomous by Nicole M. Rubino. This is actually the second book in a series, and it is a series where you actually need to start at 1 and continue. The reason I put this one on the list is there's a lot of discussion of the way that mythology treats women and the way that often women in mythology are painted as the villains just for existing, kind of. Also, it has the main character eating a man, literally just cannibalizing him after she sees him trying to date rape a woman. Then we've got Sister Made a Monster by Lucy A. Snyder. This is a cosmic horror that centers around a pandemic where women are disproportionately affected, and whether that is that there's some biological reason or whether it's because medical gender biases is left to the reader's interpretation. But we were following 3 distinct female characters and their journeys, and it just gets very weird and quite dark, and it's just so satisfying to read this woman just becoming completely unhinged and saying screw the world. Then we've got Immortal Dark by Teges Germa, and the reason I put this book on is that it literally opens with this young woman having killed someone quite cold-bloodedly. The next recommendation I can't say too much about because the less you know about this book the better, but just believe me when I say this fits the brief, and that is No Place Left to Hide by Megan Lally. And our final recommendation for this request is The Reunion Dinner by Jessie Q. Sutanto. This centers around I believe it's a Chinese New Year dinner where this family's all getting together. This mother has finally had the chance to host it for the first time, and someone gets murdered at her dinner. She is quite unpleasant to everyone around her, and she spends the evening trying to figure out who murdered her guest and making sure that her son doesn't go down for the murder. And if you want more of this kind of genre of recommendation, I actually have a video from the end of last year, and I will also link it in the description. The next request was for a good reverse harem book, and going through the books that I've read, I don't know that I've actually read that many reverse harem. I think for me, I am not picky about relationship dynamics. I think I've read a good number of books with a triad, but a triad is not a reverse harem situation. So I think I only have 5 reverse harem books that I've read, and they are like from 2 separate series. So if you kind of condense it down, it's like only 2 that I've read. So I'm gonna go with Blow Part 1 by November Sweets. I see, this is a really hard one because I liked this book when I read it, and then I was thoroughly disappointed by the sequel. But I think it was about managing expectations, and I suspect that if I were to go back and read this book all over again, I wouldn't have the same issues. And regardless, this book is very solid in its own right. Like, whatever I feel or felt about Blow Part 2, Blow Part 1 is a really good reverse harem book. The next request was for some sort of water-based horror that isn't Into the Drowning Deep or The House Under the Lake. This is another one that I somehow struggled with, but in the end I do have a wee list of books that have some kind of watery aspect to them. Some of them, or most of them, I don't remember particularly well, and there is one relatively recent release that I haven't read myself, but I think could be promising. So we've got The Deep by Rivers Solomon, and the core concept of this book is that the pregnant slaves who were drowned in like the 1600s, as in like thrown overboard off ships, metamorphosized into mermaids, and they are vengeful creatures now, and it's so full of rage, and obviously it's water based, they are mermaids. It is a fantastic story. Then we've got The Har by David Sodergren. So for those that don't know, and I kind of forget that The Har is very much specifically a Scottish word. Har is a word specifically for the mist that comes off the sea. It's very eerie and creepy. And in this book, the Har contains a kind of eldritch monster. I actually DNF'd this book. It was fine, but it didn't seem to be going anywhere. And, you know, vibes-based books that aren't really going anywhere are absolutely fine. But that's not to say this is necessarily a bad book. I just didn't feel like finishing it, and I think it very much fits the brief if you're looking for a water-based horror. The Luminous Dark by Caitlin Starling takes place in a bunch of underground cave systems where multiple previous divers, explorers have died, and there's a sort of like creepy zombie, think Silence in the Library, that Doctor Who episode sort of situation going on. It's very claustrophobic, and it's a very like close story in terms of you are literally just following 2 characters and they are both keeping secrets. We Don't Swim Here by Vincent Torrado, I don't remember very much about, but I do know it involves some lakes and some swimming pools and injustices and murder and hauntings. I think actually there's some possession as well. The Still Black Waters by Christina McDonald is probably the most tangentially water-based, but our main character sees this kind of drenched woman banging on her patio doors, and then the next morning she finds out that the person she recognised has actually been dead for a week, so she couldn't have possibly been at the doors. It has a very interesting twist to it, and yeah, as I say, it's kind of tangential, but there is water involved in it. And then the last one of the ones that I've read is E.M. Carroll's A Guest in the House. Again, I don't remember too much about it, but I think if I remember rightly, there's this strange woman that keeps appearing at their house, and she's potentially come up out of the lake, and it's quite haunting. There's twists and turns to it. It's very unsatisfying, but in the best way possible. And the final recommendation for this specific request I've got is Camp Lania by Sylvester Barzy, and this is centering around Lake Lania, the infamous deadly lake in America where if you go swimming on a boat, if you even look at it, you are in grave peril. The next one was very specific. It was like a book you would sell your soul to read for the first time again. And I, again, had a really hard time thinking about what to choose for this one. I think largely because this centres around a book having a twist that doesn't work on reread. And I think a lot of the time twists can be really satisfying in rereads because you can see all of the breadcrumbs and foreshadowing that an author has sprinkled throughout a story. So I don't mind. Also, I have an absolutely terrible memory, as you may be able to tell from the fact I can barely tell you what some of these books are about. But in the end, I landed on Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples because there is just so much to the story and it has such an emotional impact. And whilst I'm still going to be able to get that emotional impact, it's not going to hit anywhere near the same as binging volumes 1 to 9 in a single day and feeling like I've lived with the characters for this period of time. I've been so fully immersed in the world, and then to get to the end of volume 9 and it's very much like if you know you know. And whew. The next person asked for a book that's got similar vibes to Just Stab Me by Jill Barrett. This is a hard one for me because I haven't actually read Just Stab Me. I think I own it on my Kindle, but because I haven't read it, I can't guarantee that the vibes match. But I think Long Live Evil by Sarah Rees Brennan could be a good comp title because it's very meta, and from what I know about Just Stab Me, it's in direct conversation with the reader. It's addressing tropes, and I think that kind of meta commentary, you'll get that same vibe from Long Live Evil. Like, it's literally discussing all kinds of archetypes that are commonly found in fantasy books. For example, you've got the Madonna whore complex discussed. You have the idea that like men can be as horrible as they want, but heaven forbid that a woman even chooses to speak up for herself. Oh, I just... Also, there's some really great, like, smutty lines. And, oh, yes, please. Well, I mean, I've read it, but you know what I mean. And then the final one, again, is very directed at me. But if you could only choose one book that you get to read for the rest of your life, what would it be? And this, again, is a very hard one because what am I not going to get sick of if I'm just reading it on a loop for the rest of my life? I mean, I'm working... I probably wouldn't read it as much as, like, I currently read. Like, for example, I reckon I'll probably have read around 200 books this year. But, like, there's been years where I've read significantly more than that. And I cannot imagine even, like, my absolute favourite books, reading them 200 times in a year. But if it's the only book I can read and I'm going to want to return to it time and time again, it needs to be a book that really stands up and I love it. And in the end, I went for American Queen by Sierra Simone. Because here's the thing, this isn't my favourite book in the New Camelot series. Like, I love all 3 books in the New Camelot series. But this one is the closest to the characters being happy. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love books that hurt. I want that pain. But if this is the only book I can read for the rest of my life, I don't want to be in constant pain. Like, there needs to be some balance. So that's what I went with. And we're now at the end of the requests. So I put 2 things to you. One, if you have any responses to any of the requests or questions that I was asked, please do comment them down below. And also, if you have any specific requests for book recommendations, comment those and I will do my best to give you at least one book recommendation based on what you have asked for. But until next time, love you. Bye.